So really, the Home Affairs Minister is saying that government made mistakes by implementing wholesale the UN agreements or international agreements around refugees and asylum seekers. A white paper, remember, is a broad statement of government policy that is discussed, then ultimately leads to proposed laws. If these proposals are implemented, they will curb the current rights of asylum seekers and refugees. To discuss, we're joined by international refugee law expert, that's Ashraf Essop. Ashraf, thank you for being with us. Let's start with the current situation. As described by the paper, and the minister essentially paints a picture of South Africa as a free-for-all, where anybody who wants to come and apply for asylum status can, and the law makes it pretty impossible to deny them, or to a lengthy process, and it's hard to ever make them leave. Is that the current situation? Do you think it's a fair assessment?
Good evening and thanks for the invitation. Yes, I think the Minister is correct in echoing those sentiments. It is well known that South Africa has one of the best and most generous refugee systems in the world. Now, this was recently demonstrated by the US government busing about 43 Afghan refugees from Zimbabwe into the South African side of the border, then insisting that they're here to seek asylum and that they should be entertained. And when they were not entertained, those applicants managed to get a court order, not just to allow them in, but also to allow them to apply. So that's not anecdotal evidence, that's direct evidence of some of the challenges that the South African government faces with regard to what I would term asylum on demand.
Yeah.
The other side of that...
Carry on.
Yes. You also have a reality in that most asylum seekers appear to be economic migrants more than migrants that are fleeing some kind of internal or external disability, which basically kind of fits into the definition of who an asylum seeker would be. I mean, a clear example would be the current Middle East war and people affected by that war. So when you are displaced internally or externally, then you may be a candidate for asylum. But here's what the government is saying, that if you look at the white paper, it appears that we have no reservations, and the minister goes to a great detail in explaining in the bill what we would refer to comparative jurisdictions and how they dealt with. And in a word, what he said is we have had no reservations to any of the international protocols that we've signed up to. And that, in his own words, is certainly not doing us any favors.
So, Mr. Essop, just for time, I love that you brought up a tangible example, because I think this makes it real for people. So in that situation where 22 Afghans arrive at our border, I understand they were on a tourist visa to Zimbabwe. Then they come to South Africa and say we are asylums. If this is implemented, officials will have a right to refuse a claim if they didn't go to the first safe country, even if they are real asylum seekers. So is that a workable solution then? We could send them back to Zimbabwe, who can send them back to the first country of entry. The suggestion is that asylum seekers are picking and choosing where they land up, and that shouldn't be the case.
I think in a way, South Africa is this beacon of hope, almost like the Statue of Liberty is at Staten Island when you enter the US via the boat, through the ports of entry, which is how refugees traveled previously. And South Africa holds out this beacon of hope because we have a very, very strong constitution and a functional democracy with a very strong reference to the rule of law and a judiciary that really applies the law. So here's where people come, and I think we must be clear about this. There is absolutely no power to refuse a person who seeks asylum. It is not up to the refugee status determining officer at that point to say to you, no, I disagree with you. Why didn't you go to Pakistan where you were initially based? And how come you took a plane all the way to Zimbabwe? And from Zimbabwe now you come and present yourself. It's not for the RSDO at that stage to determine. It's almost like asylum on demand. So you demand it, your story is recorded both in writing and mechanically, and and it's not tested at that stage. Now, unfortunately, we have such a huge backlog. I think there was a United Nations study that it will take all of 63 years to get through the backlog of asylum seekers. Remember, from asylum seekers, you then become a recognized refugee. From a recognized refugee, you would have the conduit to permanent residence, and from permanent residence, you have citizenship. So you can see that the impact this is having, and how the minister is saying that all of the Refugee Act has to be amended.
So Mr. Essop, my final question, it sounds like you agree with this, and we will see that people can be turned back at the border, so they can't come in, and then the court process can take years. But the idea, the whole global idea, was that people who are literally escaping from bombs or war would be treated with dignity, would be given a home. Do you think this white paper still allows for that special category of people to be accommodated in South Africa?
So absolutely. I mean, I think the SCA has said that human dignity knows no nationality. So it's not like we're saying that only certain people are affected by certain instances, and that will allow you to be an asylum seeker. So there's an international protocol about how all of that happens. But I'm not necessarily agreeing with the minister. I'm merely commenting on what he says is the reality. If you look at the introduction, it says we have to be brutally honest, and I'm glad that the department is actually sitting up and taking note of how they failed dismally in many, many cases. And he says we've come second best in all of these cases. We need to stop litigation. We need to have adequate immigration regulations, citizenship regulations, refugee regulations. And one of the things that you can see is that they will move the RSDO officers close to a port of entry. So it's not like you're going to come in and then pass the border and then go to Musina. You know, the offices are located in the city, a couple of kilometers from the border. What they're trying to do, including with the Border Management Authority, which is part of this overhauling of the system, is to make sure that you actually stopped at the border or just before that. That's part of the protocol.
All right, thank you. And I hope we can chat again. I think there will be a lot of debate. Public comment open until the 19th of January. That was Ashraf Essop, immigration and refugee law expert.